Hello, we're here with our drywall joint, and this joint has had the bedding coat, which is step 1, the finish coat step 2, and then a wider finish coat step 3. So at this point we've allowed that third step to dry overnight, and we're ready to lightly sand this to get rid of any imperfections that remain. Now if you've done a very good job of sanding, or of finishing this rather, you can wet sand, but in most cases you're going to have to dry sand. So I'm going to demonstrate first off using some open face sandpaper here to dry sand this joint. This particular sanding paper is on a pole, which is common for reaching high areas and ceilings. So most of the time with drywall joints we'll use a pole mounted sander. So I'm going to go at the joint like so. I'm going to work across the joint. And I like to work on a slight angle here to make sure I don't put any lines in the joint. And the main thing to watch out is you don't want to scuff up the surface of the drywall. The drywall actually has a paper face, and if we sand too much, we'll scuff it up and need to repair that. So focusing mostly on the actual compound itself. And we're left with a very smooth finish with very little imperfections left in the finish. Now, if we did a very good job of finishing this drywall, it probably would have looked like this to start with. And in that case, we could use a sponge to wet sand that drywall. This is just a standard, this is actually a sponge for doing grout, but we can use it for drywall as well. So I have a bucket of clean water here, and if I submerge the sponge and pull it out and wring it out, this here's a key step. We want to make sure this sponge is totally wringed out. We don't want excess water, because that excess water will take too much mud off of the wall. So it's wringed out. And I'm going to work in a circular motion across this joint. And again, we don't want to get on that paper, because the sponge, even though it's not rough, it will eventually tear that paper. So work across. I can flip the sponge back over to get a clean side, and work across again to get off any minor imperfections. Now, sponge sanding is nice for multiple reasons. One, we don't put any sand dust into the air, right? When we sand, we create lots of dust, but with a sponge, no dust at all. All that dust is contained in the sponge, so I can dip it back in my water and wring it out. And in doing so, all my sanding dust is taken care of because it was in the sponge, now it's in the water. So if I need to, I can sand again with a circular motion and repeat until I'm satisfied with that final look. Now in the event that your water gets white, it's time to change the water, because we want to make sure that we have clean water for the duration of our sanding. All right, well, we have finished taping and sanding a drywall joint. A couple reminders for tool care. For one, your drywall pan. It's not good practice to reuse mud, because in the process of applying mud, some of that mud dries. And if we try and put this in our bucket and reuse it, little hunks of that mud that is dried will be in the bucket, and the next time we apply mud, we could create lines. So we don't want to reuse mud, so we're going to scrape this out and discard it. And then the pan itself we're going to wash with water and towel dry. The rest of our tools, your knives, again, clean them in water. We can use the same sponge that we sand with, or a small brush to clean your knives off, using lots of clear water until you're satisfied with the cleanliness of your knife. And the sponge itself, again, can be wrung out in clear water and allowed to air dry. And if you followed all these steps accurately, then you should have a nicely finished drywall joint. In the event that a day or two after you finish, if you notice that the joint has bubbled and the tape has bubbled up, that's a sign that you did not have enough mud underneath that original layer of tape. So if you see a bubble, it means that you need to have a thicker layer of mud in that taping step. Typically that's the biggest complaint or issue that people have with taping drywall, is the tape itself not sticking to the wall.